Hey everyone, are we on a path to eradicating smoking entirely? Let's take a look at what's going on. All right, everyone, let's take a look at this. This is a Gallup poll, and I can't really claim to have found this link. It was another blog post that I'm going to get into after this, and I want to cover the survey first, and then we'll cover the blog post. But this is big. Cigarette smoking in U.S. ties 80-year low. Now, I want to make sure you understand what that means. It's not low as it was 80 years ago. Like 80 years ago it was low, then it went up, then it... No. It has never been this low before. This is all-time low. So, why do they say ties? We'll get to that, but that's a little bit misleading, but we'll see it. So currently, 11% of U.S. adults say they have smoked cigarettes in the past week. 11%. That's insanely low. It's never been that low. When Gallup first asked about cigarette smoking in 1944, 41% of U.S. adults said they smoked. The current smoking rate is about half as large as it was a decade ago, and 1/3 as large as it was in the late 1980s. So check out this graph. So here we are in 2024, and it's 11%. It says ties because it was also 11% in 2022, and there was that little blip up in 2023. That was probably noise. That's what I'm thinking. But you see the overall trend. It's going down, 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 down. And that's pretty incredible because it used to be that, you know, your parents and your grandparents, you know, that era in the 50s and 60s, look at all the movies from then, everybody's smoking. Everybody's smoking, and then that went way down. And they say a major reason for the decline is that cigarette smoking has plummeted among young adults, who typically had been the most likely age group to smoke. That's always been the thing. You get them young. Adults quit because adults figure out, hey, this stuff is crap. And it's the new smokers coming in, generally young adults, who end up replacing them. But now that's declining because that means more and more of them aren't even starting, which is big and which has always been a big step in the right direction. If you don't start, it's a lot easier to quit. Young adults are now less likely than other age groups to smoke cigarettes. And why might that be the case? Let's scroll a little further down. Because younger adults are more likely to smoke e-cigarettes. They vape, they don't smoke. And before you go saying, well, that's the same thing, that's just as bad. No, it's not. Check the history of this channel. In the podcast and in a couple other videos, I've shown the data. There's a scientific consensus that e-cigarettes are at least 20 times safer than regular cigarettes. And that's just what they agree on. They're probably a lot safer than that. Because yes, you get the nicotine. And nicotine is an addictive drug. And nicotine probably has all sorts of side effects and everything else. It's not great. But you don't have the tars, you don't have the smoke, you don't have, the carbon monoxide and all that other crap that you're breathing in when you're burning a cigarette. And that's what makes it safer. Now, it's been kind of tough to tease out because the only way people have gotten nicotine in the past is through tobacco. What do you get it when it's just the straight nicotine? How many of those health problems are from the nicotine and how many of it is other stuff in tobacco? That's still a little bit of an unknown quantity, but it's a small amount. It's not as good as not vaping. Vaping does have health problems, but nowhere near smoking. And also, as we've covered before, with vaping, it's a lot easier to quit. A lot of smokers have turned to vaping as kind of their gateway to quitting. It's really hard to quit smoking directly. You switch over to vaping, you're still getting your nicotine fix. You're still getting the hand-to-mouth thing. I'm sure you've seen this before. You have someone who's got a pen and they're doing things with a pen and they're always going, and then about and then about and then all about it. Why are they doing that? Because they're a smoker and they just don't have a ciggy in their hand, but they've got that hand-to-mouth habit. Fun fact, if you watch the original Star Trek, you'll see Spock with his hands behind his back a lot of times. That's because Leonard Nimoy was quitting smoking. And in order to satisfy the hand-to-mouth habit, without a cigarette, he had a lollipop behind his back. And you can see this in the bloopers. He does this as soon as they say cutting the lollipops back in the mouth. There's one point where he's supposed to say the plant acts as a repository. He says the plant acts as a suppository, and everyone starts laughing and, well, lollipop right back in the mouth. Well, now it's vaping because you get that and you get the nicotine, but it's a lot easier to quit vaping than it is to quit smoking. And that's what's going on. While young adults are now the age group least likely to smoke cigarettes, they are the group most likely to smoke e-cigarettes. Well, you don't smoke e-cigarettes. It's not, you vape. It's not smoke, it's vapor. And nothing's burning. And you can see that here in this graph in 18 to 29-year-olds. 18% are smoking e-cigarettes and 6% are smoking cigarettes. That's 24%. Kind of compared to the other groups. Like the next group up, 30 to 49, 13% smoking, only 8% vaping. Put all that together, that's 21%. 50 to 64, 18 are smoking, 4 are smoking e-cigs, 22%. It's about the same percent. You don't really get a drop off until you get 65 and over, where people, I guess, have either stopped smoking or never smoked or died because they smoked. That's a sad reality of it. Only 10% there, 9% smoking and 1% vaping. But otherwise, it's pretty consistent. It's like 22, 24% or something like that. The only question is how many of them are vaping versus smoking. More young people are vaping, and that's a good trend. The problem is most people are still viewing vaping as very harmful. And that can get in the way of vaping being an alternative to smoking that is a lot safer. Because like I said, the scientific consensus is you're going to have less than 5% of the health problems that you would with smoking tobacco. But that's not the perception. 79% of U.S. adults say cigarettes are very harmful to people who use them, because they are. 57% say the same about e-cigarettes. And a majority of the U.S. adults also consider chewing tobacco to be very harmful, though fewer say this about cigars, pipes, or nicotine pouches, and that's not true. Those are still very dangerous. Mouth cancer, throat cancer, all sorts of different cancers from it. And there are the perceptions you can see in this big graph here. E-cigarettes, vaping is the third one down. It really should be last. Because of all of these different alternatives, it is absolutely the safest. The only thing that's safer is not doing any of these. And sadly, as we've talked about, that's the perception people have gotten because of everything the government and the news media has been telling them. And that's a shame because it's just not true. So let's scroll down a bit more. Today's young adults may have substituted e-cigarettes for tobacco cigarettes, as roughly 3 times as many young adults vape as smoke cigarettes. Still, vaping rates among this group are lower than cigarette smoking rates of young adults in the past. If current age trends persist, meaning today's young adults continue to vape as they reach middle age, and today's children vape at high rates when they reach adulthood, vaping may soon surpass cigarette smoking as the more common activity. While vaping presents fewer health risks than tobacco smoking, public health officials would still prefer that U.S. adults not do either. But again, the part that they're missing is how easy it is to quit vaping. And I've seen this as my daughter and her friends have gotten into adulthood, and a lot of them got into the vaping thing. And now they're in their early 20s and they just stopped. And they're like, I don't see what the point in this is. I'm just not going to vape anymore. I'm an adult now. I got bills to pay. I'm adulting. This is hard. So let's go over to where I got this from. Regular viewers, I've talked about this blog before. This is from Michael Siegel. For those of you who haven't heard me cover this guy before, he is like this big, vehement anti-smoker. I mean, much more than I am. I'm like, don't smoke because it's a stupid thing to do. He's like, ban cigarettes and make them illegal. And, of course, prohibition doesn't work. But when e-cigarettes came out, he was part of that crowd that was going, yeah, we need to ban vapes. They're as bad as cigarette smoking. But then he looked at the data and he changed his mind. Changing your mind after looking at the evidence. Gotta respect that. So this is his blog post about the study we just saw. New data show that e-cigarettes are saving lives and debunk claims by opponents that vaping is a gateway to smoking. If anything, it's the other way around. The claim by opponents of e-cigarettes that vaping is a gateway to smoking and will increase the long-term hazards of tobacco product use have now been completely debunked by longitudinal trend data demonstrating that the truth is the exact opposite. So we just went over the poll and he says, the data suggest the use of electronic cigarettes is the primary reason for the dramatic declines in smoking observed over the past few years. The amount of decline in smoking prevalence is very similar to the increase in e-cigarette use, as we just saw in the report. These data confirm the results of numerous other studies, which have demonstrated that cigarettes and e-cigarettes are economic substitutes. This means that e-cigarettes have served as a much lower risk alternative option for youth who most likely otherwise would have smoked cigarettes. And because of this substitution effect, it is very difficult to find a young adult today who is smoking tobacco cigarettes. Another way of putting this is that we have almost completely eradicated tobacco use among young adults. And of course, this means that as these young people age, we are on a path to eradicate cigarette smoking entirely. And hey, Siegel, we're doing it without laws. We're doing it without prohibition. In fact, as he says down below a little bit, spoiler alert, the prohibitionists were getting in the way. The public health benefits that will accrue from these long-term trends will be mind-boggling. While not supported by most tobacco control organizations and agencies, the advent of electronic cigarettes will, if trends are allowed to continue, one day be looked at as the end game strategy that made smoking history. Sadly, many of the tobacco control groups and health organizations that have opposed vaping from the beginning and made many false claims about both the gateway effect and the health effects of e-cigarettes, and I've covered a lot of those, will not be able to take credit for the millions of lives that will be saved because of this innovation. If anything, they have done everything they can to prevent this life-saving intervention from taking place. Yeah, the ones that are screaming about regulating vapes, banning vapes, and getting the FDA to restrict them and everything else, and spreading the fear-mongering about people dying from vapes and all that. Yep. It'll happen despite them, not because of them. And ironically, it was the regulation of vaping products that almost brought the whole project to an end. What saved the day was the loophole in the regulation that allowed disposable e-cigarettes to remain on the market. Now imagine if they relaxed them and allowed all vapes to remain on the market. Imagine how much more you could do. It will be very interesting to hear what the major tobacco control groups say now that there is very clear evidence that vaping was responsible for decimating smoking among today's generation of young adults. Well, they're not going to say anything. They're going to not look at this and deny that it's there and try to keep their misinformation being pushed. Since it is rare for people to start smoking as adults, the prevalence of smoking among this cohort of young people will almost certainly not rise above 6%. This is undoubtedly the greatest public health victory of my lifetime. Siegel, I wish there were so many more anti-smokers like you. I wish there were people in the FDA and the CDC and Congress who genuinely cared about this and who would go with the facts and the science instead of fear-mongering and the power grab. So we'll have to see. It's a good trend. Here's hoping it continues. Here's hoping we haven't plateaued. Here's hoping we can get even more vapes and even fewer tobaccos. Because don't think big tobacco isn't behind it. Vaping is a threat to big tobacco. And they don't want this alternative out there because it means fewer sales for them. And since vaping is a lot easier to quit, you've got a lot of adults who are quitting vaping very easily. And you've got smokers who move from smoking to vaping and then vaping to quitting. That didn't work with nicotine patches. That didn't work with gum. Maybe it worked for some people. But nothing has been effective for as many people as vaping for getting off of smoking. And if they just relax all the restrictions on vaping, we might actually see this come to an end. We might be this close to eradicating nicotine consumption entirely. And if not, we could at least make it so safe that the health problems associated with it are a thing of the past. That would be amazing, so be suspicious of anyone who doesn't want it to happen. Because they don't care about you. They're either out for their own money and power grab, or big tobacco is behind them. That's just the truth of it. Thank you so very much for watching. Comments for the comment god, shares for the share throne. Please hit like, subscribe, and the bell, and go to donate.bogosity.tv to keep me doing what I do. You can donate with PayPal, Venmo, all sorts of cryptocurrencies, or become a regular supporter at Patreon, Subscribestar, and Discord. Get these videos early and ad-free. Join the monthly live stream. There's a monthly AMA. There's other benefits. Check them out. Until next time, stay strong and be free.